What is the bad thing about birthdays, especially apropos as my birthday approaches? That is the setup to the dad joke of the week. Welcome to 4,000 Weeks, the weekly audio dispatch from 4K Weeks. Talking about, what are we talking about? How to live, how to enjoy life, how to get the most out of these limited weeks. This is actually just the stuff that I'm thinking about as a nearly 48-year-old man in the middle of one of the most abundant times in human history, where we all feel like everything's terrible all the time. It is week 23 of 2025. The summer routines are being established. And I was thinking about what's going to happen next year as we get back into the school year. And it's just so silly is the word I'll use. It's so silly how easy it is to slip unintentionally out of a good routine and into a routine that does not serve you. It's so important to every once in a while check in with yourself and be like, wait, is this what I want to be doing each day, every day, all day, forever? Also, wildflowers are super duper beautiful. It's time for you to walk over to your 4K Weeks poster and fill in another square. Are you done? Okay. First, at the top of the podcast this week, the ask. I'm just going to lead with the ask. If you're listening to this, you've likely listened to it before. If you've listened to it before, you likely like it. I know that if I come to a podcast regularly, it holds a very special place in my life, and hopefully that is true for you about this podcast. Did you know that to be in the top 25% of all podcasts in the world, a podcast has to have over 120 downloads in the first week after the episode's release? So within the 7 days following the release of this episode, if it gets over 120 downloads, it is in the top 25 podcasts in the world. And the 4,000 Weeks podcast does that routinely, which is insane. I didn't even really think about that. But I guess if you think about the long tail, it makes sense. It's probably not that special to be in the top 25% of all podcasts in the world, because there's so many podcasts that just have one episode or two episodes and then they stop. It's kind of like, YouTube. There are something like 4,000 hours worth of content are uploaded to YouTube every minute, some insane amount. So I think that's pretty cool about this podcast, because I just started this podcast because a friend of mine said, you should have a podcast. And then I was like, okay, what's the minimally viable way to have a podcast? And then it is basically to give you the audio version of the newsletter with some color commentary. And so to be in the top 10% of all the podcasts in the world, a podcast needs over 355 listens in the first week. So that means if each one of you listening right now stops what you're doing and sends this podcast to 3 people, you could just, copy the link in your podcast player and text it to them. We could push it into the top 10%. And that would be, I feel like that's notable, right? Being the top quarter, okay, cool, means you're not messing around. The top 10% starts to really feel like something. And so that would be amazing. And so if you would not mind, if you would please copy the link to this podcast and text it to 3 friends who you think you would like it right now. It will take you 20 seconds to do that. That would be awesome. And I would really appreciate it. And I'm not going to pause and wait for you to do it. I'm just going to assume you're going to hit pause right now and then do that. Hit pause. Boom. Okay. That's the ask at the top of the podcast. Week 23 of the year 1955. This is kind of insane. The year 1955 was 70 years ago. Is that right? 50, yeah, 50 plus 20 is 70, right? So yes, 70 years ago, former U.S. President Dwight D. Eisenhower became the first president to appear on color TV. That's insane. Think about how for granted you take color images on a flat screen. And only 70 years ago, Eisenhower was the first president to appear on color TV. He was 3,373 weeks old, or 64.68 years. I just was thinking, Eisenhower gets mentioned in here, has been mentioned here a few times. I think he was the first president to have an address into space or something. I feel like he was just in the sweet spot of the technological advances of our modern age, so that he gets a lot of credit here, which, interestingly, he was in the first turning, right? So the first turning comes after World War II, And so, of course, that is a time of growth and possibility and amazing things happening. So that makes a little bit of sense to me that he would be there. Interesting. This week, I think I accidentally put what I consumed this week above the quote. So we'll just go ahead and do it. The first thing I listened to this week was Revisionist History, Malcolm Gladwell. I listened to 3 episodes. I do love Malcolm Gladwell and his pretentious kind of lilting, liberal elite way of speaking. I really actually do like it. He's definitely too cool to hang out with me. I listened to a few of his episodes this week. So season 13. So episode 9 and 10, links are in the email. One is about the raccoons in Canada. I think it's in Toronto. They have an amazing raccoon problem, and it's just all about raccoons, and it's very interesting. And raccoons are curious little beings, and I like to see them in the city, but I do have a friend who has some nuisance raccoons that I'm glad I don't have nuisance raccoons, because they've got all night to really mess your stuff up. And then the episode 10 was about Thompson's English muffins and the trade secret IP protections that are kind of getting out of hand. And that's a very interesting read. Nooks and crannies is a funny thing to say. Next podcast, I listened to The Daily quite a bit this week. One episode was with Terry Real, who is I think he's like a marriage counselor, psychologist. And it's titled Why Boys and Men Are Floundering. I think he's kind of known for telling men that they're the problem in their marriage, which is interesting. And as I listened to it, I was super duper thankful that I had been raised in a home where expressing my feelings was normal, and also thankful that I was raised along with 2 strong and intelligent, much older sisters. I feel like that really helped me build a perspective of the world outside of my super duper masculine brain. And I do have a masculine, if there is a spectrum of the feminine to the masculine, it's not binary, right? It's a spectrum, and we all exist on it somewhere. My brain is super duper into the masculine side. And I feel like I could be very different without that softening, tempering influence of my mom and my sisters in our home. That super masculine brain has made me who I am in a lot of ways, but also being encouraged and having a safe space to lean into the feminine aspects of me, of my nature, has also made me a better person and a better husband and a dad, right? It's very important to understand the other side of things. And so I look forward to a future, after listening to that podcast, I listen forward to a future where we can all just be with whatever place of spectrum we find ourselves, and none of the trauma and crap that's like, be a man, all that stuff, right? So it's a very interesting podcast. If you are a man and you are working on your marriage, you might want to listen to it. And maybe if you're a woman too. Next podcast, Freakonomics Radio, the most powerful people you've never heard of. Man, wow. If there is a super secret cabal that runs the world and I was looking for them, I would start here with this podcast about commodities traders, I think. It's people who actually, not people who sit in front of a computer and trade oil futures and stuff, but people who actually go pay money for the physical stuff. It's really, really interesting. That is what I consumed this week. Well, just a small fraction of what I consumed, the stuff that I feel like sharing with you. I just consumed a whole bunch. Actually, I'll just tell you in the podcast, you should go listen to the Ezra Klein episode about the Trump coin, which is kind of the nuts and bolts of how World Liberty Financial, which is the overarching institution or the legal entity that, released the Trump coin. And you should go listen to that. Fascinating. I know a lot about crypto because I'm interested in crypto, and I learned a decent amount in that podcast. It's Ezra Klein Show, one of the most recent ones. Okay, now we are on to the quote of the week. I'm going to have to pause this here because the remote died. All right. The quote of the week. The quote of the week is from Terry Real, who was in that daily podcast. And I listened to it and really liked it. And this quote really spoke to me. And he said that in the podcast, he said that this is his most famous quote. Family pathology rolls from generation to generation like a fire in the woods, taking down everything in its path until one person in one generation has the courage to face the flames. And that person brings peace to their ancestors and spares the children that follow. That is Terry Real. Family pathology rolls from generation to generation like a fire in the woods, taking down everything in its path until one person in one generation has the courage to face the flames. And that person brings peace to their ancestors and spares the children that follow. Look, I don't know that it matters what comes after me from me. I mean, of course, I'd like it to be better, but all of the work we're doing now is both for ourselves and for the future. And I think that way when I think about building wealth and stuff, it's a fine line, right? You don't want to build so much wealth that you ruin the oncoming generations, but a little bit of wealth can make things possible that were not possible before. And so, as I was listening to the podcast this week and I heard this quote, I just really kind of thought for a minute about, wow, I am a good father. I might even be a great father. And the first reason that that is true is that my father did better than his father. And it's a compounding effect. And it is likely true that my son, based on all current evidence, will be a better father than I am. And if that is so, it will be the greatest triumph of my life. And so if the one thing that you do in your life, if just imagine you find yourself scrapping and struggling to get by and to make your way in this world that really puts a big, heavy tax on people at the bottom. We do that right now. If you succeed, you did it all by yourself, which we know isn't true. And if you failed, it is all your fault, which we know isn't true. But if you find yourself there, if the one thing you do in your life is to be the scorched patch of earth that keeps the fire of generational trauma from continuing to rage, then I really believe you deserve whatever are the highest honors that our society can give, because you are keeping that fire from continuing to rage, and we all currently and future benefit from it. It's a compounding on human excellence. So thank you. Okay, what am I thinking about this week? So I really struggled this week to think about what to write here. I've been working on a lot of strategy stuff, a lot of kind of deep dive back end things that are requiring a lot of my cognitive ability and my energy at work this week. And I sat down on Tuesday to write the email, and I wrote the quote. I'd write the quote then, but I had nothing for what I am thinking about this week portion. And then I sat down again on Thursday, nothing. Friday, nothing. And then I realized I was working on strategy, and I was thinking, oh wait, I think I wrote something about strategy and playing chess. I don't play chess, but playing, metaphorical chess a while back. And so this is an essay I wrote a couple years ago about the importance of strategy in all things. And so here we go. I was talking with my friend who owns a landscape company. We were talking about this. And he started high school, and when we were in college, I worked for him for a while when he was in that difficult stage between solo entrepreneur and business owner, right? When there was too much work for one guy, but not enough work to afford to pay for two guys. And so one day at the beginning, I was struggling with trimming. And, trimming or edging or weed eating, whatever you want to call it. It's one of those things that looks so easy when you watch a pro just, walk at full speed on down a sidewalk, trimming perfectly. It looks so easy. And then when you try it, it is so difficult to master. And the first lesson, actually, as I'm thinking about this, I think this was the second lesson. The first lesson was that trimming, you have to imagine like you're using the force, because the trimmer line is invisible, and it's like you have to imagine a force around the edge of the trimmer. Anyway, but so this is the second lesson then. So he said the second lesson is you have to decide on your trimmer theory. And so what that means is this: you pull up to a yard, and the yard has an edge that is not regular, right? It's not just a rectangle. There's probably got a path up to the yard, and probably got some trees, and probably got some landscaping around the edge. And you have to ask yourself a whole bunch of questions about how to get this done. Are you going to go counterclockwise or clockwise? One of those ways is easier and faster because of the way the trimmer spins, and one naturally lifts the grass up and is better for longer grass and makes a cleaner edge. And one of them shoots stones away from you, and the other one shoots stones right into your shins. And, most situations have a clear winner, and it's not one all the time, right? Sometimes you want to go this way, sometimes you want to go that way, right? That's the first question. When are you going to break from the edge to jump into the middle of the yard to trim around any islands or trees or other obstacles that are away from the sidewalk? Thinking about this saves you like real measurable time. And when you're doing jobs like this, the goal is to get it done as quickly as possible. Is there a path that keeps the retracing of your steps to the minimum? Does this part right here need a straight edge or a flat edge, right? So do you need to hold the trimmer this way or this way? Sidewalks typically lend themselves to the former, asphalt driveways the latter. The correct form for the moment makes a better finished product. It makes the work easier to do, and it makes the work better. And these are just some of the big questions, but if you actually start trimming, and if you are mindful the whole time you are doing it, as opposed to thinking, like, this is the difference between grown-ups and kids, I think. Kids are like, oh, this sucks, this sucks, this sucks. When will this be done? When will this be done? When will this be done? This sucks, this sucks, this sucks. Meanwhile, making the job harder and take longer, right? Whereas an adult, and I don't know, this doesn't have anything to do with age. An adult is like, okay, I'm doing this right here. Coming up is this little thing, and I got to go do that. Maybe I should flip this. Is this the best way to do this? Thinking about the job in order to get it done more quickly. There are countless little decisions in any job that will impact how long it takes you and how good the job looks when you are done. And so if you're doing that, you're beginning to develop your own personal trimmer theory. And then this is a thing that can be debated, right? By people who have trimmed for hours at a time. It's like, well, I think right here you should do that. And he's like, oh, well, I like doing it, right? You start to have opinions about the way the job is done. It seems like it's just trimming, but for anyone who cares to notice, and for anyone who's focused on, number one, doing a good job, and number two, being efficient at doing that job, there is a strategy. And if there is a strategy, then there are better and worse ways to accomplish the task. And if you continually test them, you will become a master. Which brings me to my second kind of example of this way of thinking. And I truly do feel like it's a way of thinking. It's a way of approaching the world. And maybe if you're successful in your life, I bet you do this. And you may call it something else, and you may not even notice you're doing it. But if you have success, you think strategically this way. And so here's the second part. I remember in college, I was deeply into Taekwondo. It was my third year, and I was a high brown belt, which is one rung below black belt. And we were having an intra-squad tournament, right? I went to the University of Kansas. I was on the intramural Taekwondo team, and we were having a tournament between everyone else. And so I was in my third match. I was pretty good back then. I've always been a little bit vicious when I need to be. And for a split second, I saw the strategy of this match open up before me. I was sparring with this opponent. And so sparring is just like you've seen, it's just like a refereed match with points and things. And, a kick to the chest or a punch to the chest is a point, and a kick to the head is a point, et cetera, et cetera. And so I was sparring this guy, and he kept dodging the same way when I threw a right roundhouse kick. So you imagine my right foot comes up, and it was the third one in 30 seconds, and I was just testing, right? And I noticed this, he did the same thing, head down and to the left. Every time I kicked, head down and to the left, head down and to the left. And in one instant, these two thoughts popped into my brain. Number one, this is chess. And number two, I need to test this. And so now I wasn't just fighting him, right? Now that there was a strategy. And so I threw another right roundhouse kick, and he dodged it with his head down and to the left. And so the next kick was a fake to the right followed with the left. And it was his movement was so predictable, and it was such a strategic move that I actually felt a little bad for how well it worked, because it ended the match. It connected so well that the match was over right then. And so the lesson here is that every single thing is chess. I don't even play chess. But what I mean is it's a game where you need to be thinking about 3 moves, 10 moves ahead. Now, at this point, I had been loving Taekwondo for almost 3 years and practicing 3 to 5 days a week for hours at a time, right? So, it reminds me how much free time I had when I was in college. And it had just occurred to me at that point to start paying attention to the strategy. I had thought about little moments of strategy before, but never like, I'm gonna walk somebody down this road to their demise. And you have to learn to look for the chess in everything, but it will often only reveal itself after years and years of practice. At this point, my friend had been trimming for 4 years by himself and trying to get the work done as fast as possible because he doesn't get paid by the hour, he gets paid by the job, and had been thinking, what's the best and fastest way to get this done? Nearly those whole 4 years. And everything is chess if you can just only see it, right? Do you have like a ton of boxes to break down and stack up? What's your strategy going to be? Do you have a ton of fallen leaves to collect? What's your strategy going to be? And in that situation, like, you could just do it dumb. You could just go get a rake and rake every inch of your backyard and then put them all in little paper bags and set them out at the curb. Or maybe you could use a blower, blow them into a pile, pretty quickly rake that pile onto a tarp and take them to the backyard and let them decompose, right? Why are you doing it the way you're doing it, right? What's the point? To get this done well quickly? Okay, maybe you should be doing it differently. Do you have a studio? I've said this before. I have opinions about how you should sweep and vacuum the floor to my studio. And the reason is because I'm always thinking about what's the best way to get this job done quickly and well. Do you have a business that needs to reduce its ad spread? What is the strategy? Do you want to spend more time with your kids? What is your strategy? I think that there's an application for this way of thinking in every single aspect of your life. And I'm not saying you need to ruthlessly optimize every minute, right? I like to sit on the porch and stare at the backyard with no goal. That's fine. But if you're doing a job, you should be thinking about this. That is the lesson for today, and it's what I'm thinking about. If you have a minute, please forward this podcast to a friend, subscribe to it, rate it, review it, do whatever you can. That would just take you a second, that would make people hear this who haven't heard it. If you think it's valuable, I wish I could share this stuff with my kids in a way that they would hear it. My kids, likely the same as your kids, do not hear me when I speak, but then they go to their rehearsals and listen to adults give them advice all day long. So share this with your kid, right? Share this next time you are trying to show your kid the right way to do a job. Share this with them. And maybe my voice will cut through in a way that I know a parent's voice cannot cut through. Okay, dad joke of the week. What is the bad thing about birthdays? Too many of them will kill you. All right, have a great week. I'm just thinking that maybe I didn't remember to tell you to fill in your 4K Weeks poster. Maybe I skipped right over that. So if I didn't tell you that, run back over to your 4K Weeks poster and fill in that next square. And I'll talk to you next week. Thanks.